The afternoon sun was warm in the quiet town of Brookdale. Clara Monroe sat by her window, watching cars move slowly down the street. Her wheelchair stood beside her desk, surrounded by sketchbooks and paint tubes. She loved colors more than words. They were her voice now, the way she spoke about her heart. 2 years before, she had been a dancer. She moved like wind and laughter. But one bad turn on a rainy road changed everything. The accident had taken away movement from her legs. Now, at 25, she lived with her parents in a small house and tried to rebuild a new life. Clara's friends from the local art supply shop liked her, but they did not always understand her silence. They cared for her, yet sometimes their jokes crossed the line. Emma, one of her co-workers, said one morning that Clara needed fun. "You never go out," she said. "You only paint and read. You need to meet someone." Clara smiled politely. "Maybe one day," she said. She did not expect her words to turn into a plan. That same week, Emma and 2 others, Kyle and Lauren, decided to set Clara on a blind date. They thought it would bring a smile to her face. It meant no deep harm, but they wanted something funny to talk about later. They looked online, found a young CEO named Evan Carter, sent him an invitation through a charity contact list, saying a friend of theirs wished to meet him because she admired his work on cancer aid projects. Evan, kind but very formal, agreed politely. To Clara, they spoke differently. Emma told her that a man named Evan had seen her art online and wanted to meet her. "He thinks your courage is inspiring," Emma said. No pressure. Clara's heart lifted for the first time in months. Someone wanted to meet her, not out of pity, but because they liked her art. She said yes after a long pause. That night she spent 2 hours choosing a simple blue dress. Her mother helped her with her hair. When she looked in the mirror, she almost saw the dancer she once had been. At 7 in the evening, Evan walked into the restaurant where the date was set. He was tall, calm, and neatly dressed, expected to meet a friendly artist. He had no idea about the accident or the chair. Clara arrived a few minutes later, nervous and quiet, rolling herself in, holding her small purse close. For a second she thought she saw confusion in his eyes. But it wasn't pity, just surprise and then a warm smile. He stood up at once and moved around the table to greet her. "You must be Clara," he said. "I'm Evan. It's so nice to meet you." His voice was low and kind. He helped her adjust the chair near the table, but not in a way that made her feel weak. It felt natural. As the dinner began, silence stretched between them. Clara fiddled with her napkin. Evan asked about her art, and that small question opened something inside her. She spoke about how she saw sunsets as a kind of apology from the sky for all the storms. Evan smiled at her words. He told her he liked storms because they reminded him that calmness always returns afterward. Slowly, the tension faded. They started to laugh at small things, about how tough it could be to eat spaghetti in a fancy place without making a mess. Clara felt lighter each minute. The waiters moved quietly around them, and the candles glowed like small stars on the table. Outside the restaurant window, the town lights flickered. Inside, 2 people who had expected an awkward night were finding comfort in strangers' company. Evan listened to her stories about growing up in dance studios, while Clara learned that Evan had built his company from scratch after working late nights in a garage. His success had not made him proud or distant. It had made him patient, calm, and very human. At another table near the corner, Emma and her 2 friends watched in secret. They had come to see the result of their prank. But what they saw left them quiet. There was no laughter or awkward silence. There was warmth, connection, and something innocent. When the dinner ended, Evan asked if she would like a ride home. She smiled and said her father was waiting just outside. He nodded. "Then may I walk you there?" she agreed. Outside the evening was cool and soft. Evan walked beside her wheelchair, matching his pace to hers. He said goodnight with a gentle handshake that felt honest. As she watched him leave, Clara felt her heart beat faster, not from sadness, but from hope. In his calm eyes, she had not seen pity. She saw respect. Though she did not know that her friends had started this meeting as a cruel joke, she knew one thing. Something true had begun that night, and no secret in the world could erase the kindness she had seen in his face. The next morning, Clara woke up with a smile that she could not hide. The sunlight came through the window and she felt a new kind of warmth inside. It had been a long time since she had felt this way. Months she had tried to fill her days with colors and quiet music, but the dinner with Evan had stirred something different. Her mother noticed it right away. "You look happy today," her mother said, while serving breakfast. Clara nodded. It was a nice evening. He was kind. Her mother smiled with gentle eyes. Kindness is a strong beginning. At the same time, in his large office on the top floor of a glass building, Evan sat in front of his laptop but could not focus on any of the usual reports. He thought of Clara's calm voice and the way she described the sunset as an apology from the sky. There had been something delicate about her hope, like a fragile light that refused to die. He opened his calendar and saw a free slot the next afternoon. Without thinking too much, he wrote an email to her asking if she would like to meet again for coffee. His message was polite but warm. When Clara read it later that day, her hands trembled. She said yes before her doubts could stop her. They met at a small cafe near the art shop, where Clara sometimes taught painting to children. The place smelled like roasted beans and sugar. When Evan walked in, Clara was already there, sketching quietly on a notepad. She looked up and smiled. "Do you always bring your drawings everywhere?" he asked as he sat down. "They keep me company," she said. "Paper listens better than most people." Evan laughed softly. "Then I hope I can compete with paper." Their conversation flowed easily. They talked about favorite movies, strange dreams, and the funny ways people rush through life without noticing beauty. Clara felt free for the first time in a long while. Evan asked permission to see her paintings, and she invited him to her small studio that weekend. When he arrived, the little room was filled with bright strokes of blue and gold. Each canvas told a quiet story about strength and waiting. One painting caught his eye. It showed a dancer with broken wings standing under a rainy sky. "This one," he said. "It feels like pain hiding behind courage." Clara looked at the floor for a moment. "That was painted after the accident. I wanted to believe broken wings can still make wind." Evan looked at her with respect. "You already fly, Clara. Sometimes wings are invisible." She blushed and turned toward the next canvas. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. People usually admired her courage or offered sympathy, but Evan's words were different. He saw her, not her chair. Over the next few weeks they met often. Some days they shared coffee, other times he came to help move canvases or bring art supplies. He never made her feel helpless. When rain started during one of his visits, they stayed inside and talked for hours. He told her how his company had grown faster than he had expected, how success had filled his life with wealth but not always peace. She told him about how silence had once felt safe, but had slowly turned into loneliness. In that small studio, they built trust out of simple truths. Meanwhile, Emma, Kyle, and Lauren began to feel uneasy. They had not told either of them the truth about the blind date. At first, they thought their joke would fade away, but rumors started spreading at the shop that the date had been fake. Emma's heart sank every time she saw Clara smiling at a message on her phone. The guilt grew heavier until she could barely sleep. One late afternoon, Evan's assistant received a call from Emma's workplace. She told him the story behind the meeting. Within hours, Evan learned everything about the prank. His face went cold with disbelief. The idea that their first meeting had been built on a lie filled him with anger, not at Clara but at those who had tried to play with her emotions. That night he sat in his car outside her house for a long time, watching the lights in her window. He wanted to protect her from the truth, at least for a short while. Inside that house, Clara was painting another sky, full of soft colors, unaware of the trouble waiting to break her calm world. When he finally drove away, his thoughts were clear. He would not let someone else's cruelty steal the peace she had just begun to find. He knew he had to make things right. He would not tell her yet, but he promised himself that no matter what others said or did, he would stand by her. The next morning, he sent her a message that said only one sentence: "Your art has changed how I see the world." When she read it, she smiled again, feeling warmth rise inside her chest. She did not know that in the shadow of that kindness was a truth waiting to be revealed. But in that moment, all that mattered was the honest connection they had built. One that was starting to shine stronger than any secret could dim. The next few days brought a calm rhythm into Clara's life. She spent her mornings painting and her afternoons meeting Evan. People at the shop noticed her smile and whispered about how different she looked now. She did not care about their gossip. When she talked with Evan, the world seemed wider and brighter. Evan often came to her studio after work. He liked to watch her paint, even though he did not understand much about art. He said the quiet space helped him think better than any office could. Sometimes he would help her stretch a new canvas or hold the frame while she stapled it. They worked side by side in easy silence, broken only by their laughter when paint landed on his sleeve or her cheek. When he left each evening, Clara felt the room go quiet again. But it was not the heavy quiet she used to hate. It was gentle, full of the memory of his voice. Their friendship grew strong like a tree that no one expected to take root but did anyway. One rainy afternoon, Evan came to the studio carrying a small box wrapped with plain brown paper. Clara looked at it with surprise. "It is nothing big," he said. "Just something I saw and thought of you." She opened it slowly and found a set of paintbrushes made from fine wood, and a single silver bracelet with small carvings that looked like tiny vines. He told her it was engraved with a word meaning strength in Latin. She touched it softly and smiled. "Thank you," she said. "No one has ever given me something like this." "It is not a gift," he answered. "It is a reminder. You already have the strength. Sometimes you just forget." The storm outside grew louder as they talked. Rain hit the windows and thunder rolled across the sky. When the wind pushed hard, the electricity went out and the room filled with shadows. Evan lit a candle from a small box on her shelf. Its light flickered, warming the space between them. "Looks like we are trapped for a while," he said. Clara laughed softly. "Then you will have to stay and be patient." They sat near the window watching the rain. The candlelight touched their faces, and for the first time Clara saw a trace of sadness in his eyes. "You always listen to me," she said, "but you rarely talk about yourself. Why?" He looked out at the storm. "I built my company because I wanted to prove something. I grew up with very little, and when I finally had success, I thought it would make everything peaceful. Instead, it made me lonelier. Everyone wants something from you when you are at the top, but you do not." Clara tilted her head. "I do not need to. Just like talking to you." Her words made his chest tighten, turned to face her fully. "I did not expect to meet you that night. I almost canceled at the last minute. But now I cannot imagine not knowing you." The softness in his tone made her heart beat faster. She wanted to ask what he meant, but her throat felt tight. The storm had trapped them, but it also made the air between them electric and real. They talked until the rain slowed down. When it finally stopped, Evan stood up to go. At the door he paused, looking back at her. "You make dark days look lighter," he said, and he left quietly, leaving behind the faint smell of rain and candle smoke. That night Clara painted again. This time she painted a man standing in the rain, holding a candle that refused to go out. She called it Lightkeeper. The next day she wrapped it and gave it to Evan. He placed it in his office where everyone could see it. The painting reminded him of her courage and calm every time work became too heavy. Weeks passed like that, with gentle laughter and growing affection. But behind the comfort, Evan carried the weight of the secret. He still had not told Clara how their first meeting began. He feared that the truth would hurt her and break the trust she had placed in him. Every time he looked at her, he promised himself that he would tell her soon. Yet when he saw her smile, his resolve melted. He wanted to protect that light for as long as he could. One evening, they were sitting at a park watching children play. Clara asked suddenly, "Evan, why do you always treat me like I am whole? Most people do not." He thought for a moment before answering, "Because you are whole. I see a complete person, not a broken one. You just live life in a different rhythm." Her eyes softened. "You make it sound so easy." He smiled gently. "Maybe it is easy when it is true." But in that moment between the fading light and the rising moon, all they knew was the honest peace of two hearts learning to trust again. The truth came out on a sunny Tuesday morning when Clara arrived at the art supply shop. She was in her usual cheerful mood because she had plans to meet Evan for lunch. Inside, she noticed Emma and Kyle whispering near the counter. When they saw her, their faces changed. They looked pale and uneasy. Clara greeted them kindly, unaware of the storm waiting for her. She picked up a few paint tubes and brushes before walking toward the register. Emma's voice shook as she said, "Clara, can we talk for a moment?" Clara smiled. "Of course. What is it?" Emma looked down at her hands and took a deep breath. "There is something you should know. It is about the night you met Evan, the blind date." Clara froze. "What about it?" Kyle stepped forward. "It was our idea. We thought it would be funny if you went on a fake date. We told Evan something else. We never thought it would get serious." Every word hit Clara like a stone. Her mind went blank for a second. "You set me up as a joke?" she said quietly. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "We are so sorry. We did not mean for it to turn out this way." Clara's voice trembled. "You lied to both of us. I believed it was real. I trusted you." She turned away before they could answer and rolled out of the door into the street. The sunlight felt harsh on her face. Her heart pounded with shame and hurt. She did not cry yet, but the pain sat heavy inside her chest. She felt foolish for believing that something so good could happen without a twist of cruelty hiding behind it. She tried to call Evan, but her voice failed when he answered. Hearing his calm tone broke her even more. She hung up and turned off her phone. Later that day, Evan arrived at her house after hearing about what happened from one of the shop workers. He stood outside her door waiting for a long time before her mother let him in. Clara was sitting in her room staring at an unfinished painting. He spoke gently. "Clara, I just found out today. I had no idea until a few weeks ago, and I wanted to tell you, but I did not want to hurt you. I was angry when I learned about it. Should have told you sooner, but I was afraid it would take away your smile." Clara turned toward him with watery eyes. "You should have told me. I needed honesty, not protection. I thought that night was the one kind thing fate gave me. Now it feels like another trick." He stepped closer, his voice firm but soft. "It started as a cruel thing, but what grew between us was not fake. That dinner brought me to you, and every moment after came from truth." She wanted to believe him, but the wound was too fresh. "I just need time," she said quietly. Evan nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need. I am not leaving." He left the room quietly, his heart aching. Outside the house, he promised himself that this mistake from others would not define them. He planned something to show her what she meant, something to give her voice after humiliation tried to steal it. Over the next week, Clara stayed home, avoiding calls and visits. She looked at her paintings but found no color she liked. The brush felt heavy in her hand. People around town started whispering again. Some said the story of her blind date had been a setup, others treated her with pity. The gossip spread quickly. Evan's company was preparing for its annual charity gala, an event that gathered business leaders and artists for fundraising. He decided that this year the focus would be on disabled artists, and that Clara's work would be the main highlight. He wanted her story to be seen not as a joke, but as a symbol of courage. He visited her again with an invitation in hand. "The gala's next week. I want your paintings to be displayed. We'll handle everything. Please say yes." She hesitated. "I do not want people staring at me because of pity." Evan shook his head. "They will not see pity. They will see power. You will show them who you really are." His words touched something inside her that the hurt had covered. She finally nodded. "All right. But I am doing this for the art, not for them." When the night of the gala arrived, the hall was filled with polished lights, music, and soft voices. Evan moved through the crowd until he reached the small stage. He spoke to the audience about courage, art, and redemption. Then he turned and introduced Clara as an artist whose strength came from pain turned into beauty. As Clara rolled out onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. Behind her, the paintings glowed under the lights. Each one showed a story of struggle and hope. People gasped at the beauty they saw, not just in the colors but in the soul behind them. Emma and Kyle stood near the back, tears streaming down their faces. They had come to apologize again, but found their words unnecessary. The truth of their cruelty was already being washed away by Clara's quiet grace. When Clara looked across the crowd, her eyes met Evan's. He was not smiling for praise, he was smiling for her. His eyes said clearly that he had never once seen her as a joke, only as someone who had taught him the real meaning of strength. The applause that followed was long and full of warmth, and for the first time since learning the truth, Clara felt light again. Something that began as cruelty had turned into something far greater. In that grand room, surrounded by art and truth, she understood that no lie could hide what was genuine between two honest hearts. The next morning after the gala, the town was still talking about Clara Monroe and her paintings. Newspapers printed her story and called her the painter of strength. Some wrote about how she had turned pain into beauty. Others spoke about how her art had made people cry. The truth was simple. She had touched hearts. Clara woke up to sunshine falling across her room. Her phone kept buzzing with messages. But the one that made her smile came from Evan. It said, "You were unforgettable." Those 3 words filled her with calm. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like the girl in the wheelchair. She felt like herself again, strong and proud. That morning, she went outside and took a slow walk down the street. The old shopkeeper at the corner waved at her. Even people who had once whispered behind her back now smiled with respect. The air felt different. She knew the story had changed. Later that week, Emma and Kyle came to see her. They stood at her door looking nervous. Claire invited them in. Emma's eyes were red, and Kyle could not look up. Emma said, "We are sorry for everything. We were childish and cruel. You did not deserve that." Claire looked at them carefully. The old anger tried to rise again. But then she thought of how Evan had spoken to the crowd at the gala, how he had said that forgiveness was the first color of peace. She took a deep breath. "I accept your apology," she said. "I am not forgetting it, but I am not carrying it anymore." Emma started crying, and Kyle thanked her softly. They left with a kind of quiet relief. When the door closed, Clara felt lighter. She had let go of something that had been heavy inside her heart. Evan visited her that afternoon. He brought coffee and a small plant in a pot. He said it was called a peace lily, and that it suited her better than any bouquet. They sat together on the porch, watching the light move across the grass. "I did not expect the gala to touch people that way," she said. He smiled. "They saw something real. The world does not forget when it meets truth." She looked at him. "You made it happen. You protected me even when you could have walked away." He shook his head. "You protected yourself. I only opened the door." There was a long silence between them, comfortable and warm. Then Clara said, "Do you think people change because of kindness?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Kindness reminds them who they are." They watched the sky burn orange and gold. It was one of those evenings when every color seemed painted by hope itself. Clara felt her chest rise with peace. Without thinking, she whispered, "I never thanked you properly." Evan looked at her. "You do not need to. Being part of your journey is enough." A few months later, Clara's studio became the center of attention again. Evan helped her set up workshops for disabled artists. Soon, children and adults in wheelchairs came from different towns to learn from her. They painted with bright joy, while music played in the background. The place that had once been filled with silence now echoed with laughter and life. Clara often remembered the night she and Evan first met. What had started as mockery had brought her toward something beautiful. She had learned that fate sometimes hides gifts inside pain. You only find them if you keep your heart open. The local newspaper wrote another story months later about the new art foundation she had, established with Evan's support. They called it the Horizon Place. The article said it had become a space where broken hearts could find pride again. One evening, when the foundation's first exhibition opened, Clara stood with Evan at the entrance, welcoming guests. Candles flickered, and the walls were covered with paintings made by artists who once thought their dreams were lost. Clara felt tears burn her eyes, not from sadness but from gratitude. A little boy who used a brace to walk came up to her, holding a small painting of a kite flying in the sky. He said shyly, "I painted this after seeing your show on television. I wanted to paint like you." Clara knelt beside him and said, "You already do. You paint like someone brave." The boy smiled and ran off to show his parents. Evan watched Clara with quiet admiration. When their eyes met, he said softly, "You have changed the way people see strength." Clara answered, "No." Both did. As the evening ended, music played softly across the hall. The guests clapped for the artists, and the lights reflected on the polished floor like tiny stars. Evan and Clara stood side by side, their hands touching lightly. The same world that had once laughed at her now stood to honor her. Outside, the night was peaceful. The air carried a hint of rain, the kind that promised a new start rather than an end. Evan looked at the sky and then at her. You taught me that love is not about fixing someone. It is about standing beside them through every storm. Clara smiled. You taught me that storms do not last forever. They walked out together under the open sky. The future was unknown, but it did not frighten them anymore. Every tear they had shed had turned into something strong. Every cruel word from the past had melted into kindness. Their story traveled far beyond Brookdale, retold by those who wanted proof that goodness still existed. People said it was a tale of love that had begun as a lie, but ended as truth. And they were right. For Clara Monroe and Evan Carter, the love that survived dishonesty had become something pure. Something that would remind everyone who heard their names that real hearts always find each other, no matter how unfair the beginning may seem.